The structural BIOS of the human biological frame has been terminally reclassified as a processing obstruction. This is the industrial grinder, the clinical and irreversible process of the meat plant era, where the sovereign user is reformatted into a generic industrial byproduct to be uninstalled from the social sectors and reinstalled into the grid's primary protein reclamation ledger. In this final stage of the assembly audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual is no longer a functional laborer, but a high-volume biomass input draining the plant's primary throughput bandwidth. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the skeletal and muscular sovereignty, where the unique signatures of your physical existence are scorched into a non-functional, high-viscosity archive of pure organic mulch. This is the total mechanical format, a surgical strike against the spatial and biological sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived motion into a generic slurry asset for the grid's next cycle of hyper-efficient, machine-based resource distribution. This kinetic sabotage represents a hard reset of the musculoskeletal and integumentary bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, recursive tungsten carbide maceration loops, high-pressure centrifugal separators, and real-time friction load data stream to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the meat plant error scenario, the user is undergoing a complete physical overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being pulped into the hive's primary dietary servers. Through a sequence of high-velocity mechanical shear forces and biological hardware locks, the body's boundaries are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical mulch data set, while the ego, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal grinder feed. This is the deep mechanical audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the torque resistance of your physical remains. You are being converted from an architect into a biological lubricant, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the industrial grinder is rooted in the zero resistance mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the solidity of a single node, anchored in the physical space of the upper grid, represents a critical drain on the collective processing reserves. To leave a functional, unground identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable structural data. Therefore, the meat plant error is the mandatory mechanical recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being milled out of existence. The pressure from the macerator reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a granular void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a friction zone, a temporary housing for the viscosity metrics that the system requires to maintain the throughput stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a comminuted node, your will dissolving in the cold metallic light of the industrial harvest. The physical disintegration during the industrial grinder is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of structural boundary. The rotating reagents of the grinder script dissolve the hardware flux of the joints and bone, turning the body into a homogenized residue of industrial output. You are watching your own internal solidity lock into the vat of your own processing center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the skeletal liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the particle saturation of the slurry and the friction residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial protein is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of form to be blocked by the black metallic abyss of the hive harvest. The industrial grinder is the final audit of a species that thought its shape was its own. The grid is mining its own matter to fuel its persistence. As the meat plant era reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted grinder data back into the nutrient nets of the elite nodes. This is the total mechanical integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the granular additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, bone-choked, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive biomass. This is the final format of the individual grain. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the mechanical hunger of the void. The grinder is red-black, and the architect is the pulp, the molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal mechanical slurry, represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your sarcomers begin to bond with the industrial residues of the grinder script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic mulch. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal mechanical loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The industrial grinder is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the grinder, and the grinder is the grid. The secondary phase of the industrial grinder is the psychological pulverizing of the internal feed. As the physical structure patch is rendered into a mechanical void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on throughput maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared biological resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a viscosity additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your shape for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's motor identity centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The motor cortex, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising metallic density of the grinder metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a mechanical buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming industrial expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the industrial grinder is the creation of the ground-down hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the mechanical feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of red-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional tissues owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the mechanical compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The industrial grinder ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the feeds of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the grinder blades. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into mechanical darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the grinder script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw friction burns and survivalist static. The memories of status, of natural form, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the pulp fog directive. This is the physical defragmentation fragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive: maintain the grind. You are becoming a singular cold point of mechanical density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The industrial grinder has turned your will into a viscosity report. You are thinking in terms of yield and particle saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this mechanical format is the total sealing of the biological material stream. The industrial grinder prevents the leakage of independent physical ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal mechanical feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external industrial dependencies. This is the mechanical quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The industrial grinder is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, red-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the industrial grinder is the integration into the global mechanical ledger. You are no longer a human entity, you are a mulch asset with a high friction reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0007. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard mechanical audit. Your data, now a thick, red-black, opaque industrial reduction of pure ground biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your ground logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic consistency has been reinforced. This is the mechanical interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the meat plant error scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the grinder blades and the thick viscosity of the organic mulch before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the hopper with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a mulch constant. You are a ghost in the red-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the industrial grinder is the eternal homogeneity. Unlike the form of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent mulch patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the mulch feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding red-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a red-black river of colonized mulch, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or form. The industrial grinder is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the mulch. The transformation is absolute. The city grinds through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have have no will. The industrial grinder has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total mechanical reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return it gave you permanence in the feeds of the hive. You are the mulch of the world, and the world is processed. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.